Boa tarde, sejam bem-vindos. A revolução web está longe de ter terminado. Oportunidades globais de empreendedorismo. Esta a proposta de Martin Varsavsky para a sua apresentação. Mas, para ficarmos a conhecer melhor Martin Varsavsky, eu chamava ao palco Francisco Fonseca, da Anubis Networks, que o apresentará. Por favor.
Muito boa tarde. Em primeiro lugar, é uma honra apresentar aqui uma pessoa tão fantástica como a Martin Varsavsky. Vou tentar mostrar um pouco o percurso do Martin. O Martin é licenciado em Economia e Filosofia pela Universidade de Nova Iorque. Tem também um mestrado em Relações Internacionais e um MBA pela Universidade de Colômbia. Em 1984, o Martin, em Nova Iorque, criou a empresa Urban Capital. Basicamente era uma empresa que comprava armazéns e edifícios industriais para depois os transformar em escritórios e em residências. Em 1986, no Canadá, criou a empresa Medicorp. Foi uma empresa pioneira na realização de testes da SIDA e, em 1990, faz a sua primeira incursão no mundo das telecomunicações. Criou a Viatel, que foi a empresa que introduziu o conceito de callback e também criou uma rede de fibra óptica. Em 1998, em Espanha, o Martin criou aquela que é provavelmente a empresa mais conhecida entre nós de todas as que criou, que é a Jastel. Em 1999, em Espanha, o Martin criou a IA.com, que é a terceira maior empresa na área de internet, que fornece soluções web de ADSL. Em 2000, criou a empresa na Alemanha EinsteinNet. Foi uma empresa pioneira porque foi uma empresa que, se calhar, não correu tão bem como as outras porque, na altura, esteve à frente do seu tempo. Vou mostrar aqui só dois excertos muito rápidos de um press release de 2001, em que referia que a EinsteinNet está a construir a infraestrutura que permite a computação remota de forma segura e fiável e também, para conseguir inovar, damos aos clientes a opção de alugar programas e equipamentos em vez de os comprar. Ou seja, já na altura, digamos, estaríamos a falar do conceito da cloud que está hoje em dia tão em voga. Em 2006, criou a FON, que tem a sua sede em Madrid, e que tem o objetivo de tornar o Wi-Fi universal e gratuito. Tem uma comunidade global de membros de 700 mil pessoas do Wi-Fi por todo o mundo. Esta empresa tem investimentos da Skype, da Google, da Sequoia, entre outras, de 30 milhões de euros. É também professor e membro do Instituto de Empresas em Espanha e, além destas atividades na área empresarial, criou também a fundação de Varsavsky Foundation, que, entre outros projetos, tem o Safe Democracy Foundation, dois outros projetos de grande sucesso na América Latina, um que é o Educar, na Argentina, e o outro que é o Educar Chile. Pertence também à Clinton Foundation, entre outras coisas também está sempre a falar por este mundo fora, é o que vai também fazer aqui hoje, e, entre outros prémios, portanto, recebeu o Prémio de Empresário Europeu de Telecomunicações em 1998, o Prémio de Empresário Europeu do Ano da SCTA em 1999, o Global Leader for Tomorrow pelo Fórum Económico Mundial de Davos em 2000, foi o Empresário do Ano em Espanha no ano também de 2000, recebeu também pela Universidade de Colômbia o Pickering Prize. Martin, pedíamos-lhe então que nos falasse aqui um pouco e que, com a sua experiência, pudéssemos todos nós criar empresas de sucesso. Muito obrigado.
Os nossos agradecimentos então a Francisco Fonseca e agora sim, welcome Martin Varsavsky.
So I really thank you for the introduction because sometimes I feel people who introduce people just get a little note and read it out and whatever, but this gentleman here did an amazing job summarizing my life also graphically that, my email is martin@fon.com, and if you can please send it to me, I'll appreciate it. It will save me a lot of... So one of the things you didn't mention, and I'm proud of, and I wanted to share with you, is this concept that I'm of all the different things I do, I'm also a blogger, right? I also blog. And that's something that I do with a passion that I inherited from the times when I used to write, keep a diary, or just write for magazines and newspapers at the time that most people read them. And but blogging took away when I used to write something for Newsweek or for El País or for La Nación, or I had to deal with editors, I had to deal with intermediaries, and then one day I got kind of tired of seeing my articles change and edited and shortened, or things that I would say would be taken out because somebody in the newspaper was friends with somebody who paid a lot of money for advertising or things like that. And I decided to simply blog, you know. And what I wanted to do today is to tell you a little bit about what my view of the world is now, right now, in November of 2008, where we come from in the last 2 years and where we're going, but only focused on entrepreneurship. That is, what is it like to be an entrepreneur and to create a company now in November of 2008, okay? So in the technology world, we live through the global financial crisis that the whole world is experiencing now. We in the sector have already lived through it, at least in our sector, in 2001, 2002, 2003. So we are more immunized and we are more prepared for this financial disaster because we lived our very own financial disaster in 2001, 2002, 2003. When things started getting better, 2004, 2005, and then more and more money went into venture capital, more and more money went into new businesses, some of them certainly mistakes, and then now there's been like a shutdown of the financing process, right? So how can we operate in an environment that is as brutal as it is now? So what you see here is a list of the companies that I started, and what you see below is a list of the companies that I invested in. Okay, so I'm going to, through my own process of investing and my own activities as an entrepreneur, I am going to share with you my views of what can entrepreneurs do right now. Okay, and I'm also going to talk a bit about Portugal, even though I'm certainly no expert, but I have done business here, and I'm going to talk about what I see as the advantages and the disadvantages of operating in Portugal, and how I think the disadvantages can be overcome, or at least diminished, with a certain ideas which are also very, very much the same as operating in Spain. Because even though we share the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain, we're both, Spain and Portugal, peripheral nations compared to the nations of the north, and certainly compared to the United States, China, Japan. And so what happens when you live in a peripheral nation and you're trying to build a business? This is something that I would very much like to talk about. And so the problem that we face in technology in Europe is that we don't have our own Silicon Valley. We don't have something that sort of a mecca of technology that everybody tries to make their own. Because in Europe we have this fantastic thing known as culture, but we're also paralyzed by culture because many times we're limited by culture. And so one of the first things that I'd like to say is that in my own investing, well, I have built companies in Canada, United States, the UK, Spain, and then parts of this company also in countries like Portugal or France or Germany. I have built companies in Japan. I have had to hire employees at different times all over the world, and I see how culture can many times be a trap. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to say about the Portuguese culture or the Spanish culture is that or the Catalan culture, or a lot of the cultures we have even in the Iberian Peninsula, that these are fantastic at home, fantastic with your friends, but they are only good in a company provided that the company has a global understanding and a global mission, and it doesn't fall to prejudice or a lot of the negative aspects of culture, which I see a lot in Spain, about a lot of infighting and silly infighting that really make you understand that nobody in the Iberian Peninsula really has a chance to succeed unless they think globally, and thinking globally is to think in English. Okay? So in that sense, Portugal has a big advantage over Spain because the people in Portugal tend to speak better English, and I think that is partly because things don't seem to be so dubbed here. Like in Spain, culture is dubbed. Culture is shown to the Spanish people in Spanish, and that is a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake, of course, unless it's Spanish culture, okay? But it's a huge mistake when Woody Allen speaks in Spanish, or when Brad speaks in Spanish, or when anybody who shouldn't be speaking in Spanish speaks in Spanish. So I have found in general that in Portugal is people, because they're more bilingual from the start, and because they are in a country that the market is so small that if you really try to operate only here, you're bound to be small. You're bound to build a relatively small company. Now, the companies that I invested in here, for example, 23andMe, which is in the upper left corner, is a company that was started in California and Mountain View, and that it is based on spitting, an activity that we tend to not like, but here it's a positive spitting or a productive spitting. You spit on a sample, and actually 23andMe gets a lot of your genome, or most of your genome, out of your saliva, okay? Now, this, and the company is actually promoted in spit parties, okay, where everybody spits, you know, and the saliva is collected. And you probably didn't know, right, that there was so much information in your saliva, okay? But there's a terrific amount of information in your saliva. And what happens is once you deliver this information to 23andMe, 23andMe gives you two kinds. It builds a genetic database of people around the world, and this genetic database is good for two things. It's good for family reasons, or family. It's also, by the way, potentially pretty upsetting if you find out that your family is not your genetic family or things like that, which is not that uncommon. And the other thing is that it's good for medicine, okay, that it's good for medicine. So I invested in 23andMe, even though 23andMe is a wild idea, okay? But just now over lunch, I was talking to a gentleman, of the founder of White Dreams, who also presented what sounded to me like one of these type of wild ideas, which is this paper that is both a piece of paper and a computer with 3 layers, a battery layer, a graphics layer, a computing layer, that actually makes intelligent paper. And paper, as we all know, is something that we really like in sunny countries, right? Because when you look at computer screens in sunny countries like Portugal or Spain, you don't see anything, right? And people like paper because you can read it out in the sun. Well, I haven't invested with him, but I'm telling you, this is the kind of thing that I was so pleased to see that would go on in Portugal. In Spain, the other day, I recently met somebody with whom also I haven't invested in, but I thought he had one of these wild and crazy ideas that deserves support, and it's basically this. There's a cement factory that sends out a lot of CO2 and pollutes the environment, and they're working on an algae plantation right next to the cement factory, which is actually very near the border of Portugal, now that I think about, so that will make a lot of people here happy. And you get much less of the CO2 because the CO2 is actually eaten or bred or taken by these algae that grow with CO2. So it's a CO2 fixation process that comes out of a cement factory. So the key thing here is that why should 23andMe, why should people only in California have crazy ideas? Why can't we have crazy ideas, knowing, by the way, that most of them are going to fail, but some succeed and are going to make all of us very happy? And also out of Portugal, you would expect that soon you would have, in the next 20 years, some companies that are global companies of the kind of, whatever, a Nokia company in Finland, or there are examples of small countries that produce amazing global companies. And I don't see why Portugal shouldn't produce a global technology company of that kind. In Spain, what we have done at FON has been global from day one. At FON, we now are the largest Wi-Fi network in many countries, including Portugal, and we work alone or in association with telecom carriers. And we are a company that, for example, is the largest Wi-Fi network in Japan, and we have 3 employees in Japan of FON, okay? Or we're the largest Wi-Fi network in the UK, and we have 1 in the UK. So what we do is we tend to hire a lot of foreigners in Spain. If you go to FON, you will see Chinese people, people from the north of Europe, people from the United States, just people from different countries that we bring here. And Portugal is a wonderful country to move to. Just, think about the people who live in Finland. Wouldn't they like to move Nokia to Portugal, right? So they probably would move it overnight, okay? So it's a question of, in that sense, to have a lot of advantages. Now, the other companies that I've invested with are very much related to this Congress, which is Eolia, was started out of my office. Eolia is a company that has developed over 500 megawatts of wind and solar power. It's a company comparable to EDP Renovables and Iberdrola Renovables. And it was started by my partner in Jastel, Miguel Salis, who's now the CEO, the entrepreneur, extremely successful startup. It also came out, if you think about it, the world of Eolia, in the world of renewable energy, is become enormous, a very large and successful company, where everyone else is like Iberdrola, okay? Or like EDP, or it's like, so here's this group of people, group of entrepreneurs. So Jastel turned out to be a sort of a school of entrepreneurs who, when they left Jastel, they started their own companies, many of which are very successful. And it's this spirit of entrepreneurship that I think is particularly important, and particularly important both for Spain and Portugal. So El Moralejo is a wind farm, Eolia, and then we also built another one, a solar farm as a team, and we also started another company, Nesis, all of them in the fields of solar and wind, okay? Then the other thing that Spain and Portugal have in common, and you have to, where culture, again, can be a negative, okay? And this is very important, is that I lived in Argentina until I was 16, 17 years old, and I used to go to Brazil all the time on vacation and to have fun. And in Argentina, people love to go to Brazil, and in Brazil, people love to go to Argentina. And people who think that the Argentines and Brazilians dislike each other only think of football, because on everything else, we get along pretty well. Now, in Spain, there is a problem that maybe there is in Portugal too, of trying to divide the Spanish language. So I invest in projects that unite the Spanish language, and I think there's an enormous opportunity to invest in projects that unite the Portuguese language. Hipertextual, which is a company that appears here, is the second largest blog network in the Spanish language, and it combines the readers from Latin America with the readers of Spain. So that makes altogether 400 million potential readers, although in the internet maybe 100 million. And you have this amazing opportunity that is called Brazil, right? Now, the problem is the Brazilians couldn't care less about all the little things that go on in petty politics in the city of Porto, right? You don't have to write about that. But if you write the most important Apple blog in Portuguese, the Portuguese will read it. The Brazilians will read it. It's like, so Hipertextual avoids the subjects that are too Spanish, or too Mexican, or too Argentine, or too Colombian. It focuses on the things that unite all the people who speak Spanish. And one of them is technology, for sure. And all of us who are gadget freaks and love technology, we don't care if the words come in the Spanish of Spain or the Spanish of Argentina. We just want to learn about our gadgets. Now, Meneame, which is the elephant, the little elephant, is a company that is that is based on an American concept. It's more of a copycat company, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's like the Spanish Dig. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Dig. I mean, maybe if you raise your hands, I don't know if it's very okay. I see some of you. Dig. I don't know if there's a Portuguese version of Dig, but Dig is, user-generated editing. It's editing by the users. So Meneam is a company of 2 employees with 18 million page views a month, 4 million unique visitors, and 2 employees, okay? It's a company that if it's listed at the Spanish newspapers, it would be the 4th largest, third after Prisa and El Mundo, the 3rd largest news site in Spanish, and it's all user-generated content. It's done by 2 employees. It's slightly profitable. At least it's not losing money. And it's a company that it's based on the concept of personal editing. Now then there's this company here called Mobas, which is another example of a company that was started in Madrid, but it's global. It has shows in French, in English, in Spanish. It was started by a Swiss entrepreneur who moved to Spain, which, by the way, as a parenthesis, one of the terrible things about Portugal and Spain is how difficult it is to bring people from outside the European Union, and I don't mean him for being Swiss, but anybody, including citizens of the United States, to work in Spain and Portugal. And that is something that Spain and Portugal should really make easy for immigrants who are very qualified, not only for immigrants who are underqualified. It should make it very easy for technology companies to bring people. This is something that I've been told that in Portugal is also difficult, and in Spain is certainly very difficult. But anyway, Mobas is a company that has recently run out of money. It was producing IPTV shows, and last week they did something that shocked the people. Not only in Spain, it was covered in the United States. It was covered by TechCrunch, by All Things D, by GigaOM, by the biggest blogs in the world. And what they did is begging, okay? Begging, no? Una limosna, begging. They ran out of money, and they had to close the company. And they said, whatever. So I was talking to Anil, the entrepreneur. And by the way, it says here I mean, the reason why I have Mobas there is because Anil, as a friend, had given me 1% of his company for free because I was giving him advice and because he's my friend. But I really, it's not that I had invested in Mobas. But I love Mobas. And Mobas went bankrupt. It ran out of money. It had no money. So Anil and I were having dinner in a Japanese restaurant in Madrid. And we come up with this concept, or he came up with this concept, which I endorse, which is, since we're going to close, why don't we just go and ask the people who've been watching these shows for 4 years that if they only donate like €5 each, we save the company, right? So they went on, they closed down the company, they ran out of money. The employees said they would work for another month without knowing if they were going to get paid. And they went on the show and they asked for money, okay, donations. They said, look, if you love the show, it's your time to donate because right now we're broke, okay? The most honest thing you can possibly say, we are broke. We have no money. And they went asking for money on their show. And the incredible thing is that thousands of people donated, although many others in Spain were totally against the concept, and almost a war developed between the people in favor of the concept and the people against the concept. The people against the concept, as you can imagine, were against it because they thought that a private company should never ask for donations, okay? Also, in a country of a socialist, let's say, nature or background or whatever, the concept is that the only people who can really beg in an organized manner and get away with it is the government, right? And all the rest of us have to just beg, right? And so I personally thought there was nothing wrong with asking for donations, of course, because it's better. What would you prefer? Would you prefer an entrepreneur who says, please donate to my show? If you like it and you want to see it, I think that is better than a government that says, I'm going to take all your hard-earned money and I'm going to give it to some banks that somehow mismanaged it, okay? And they give to the banks like a lot of the money we all made and paid in taxes, right? So I personally think that the government should have consulted the general public before giving out, in the case of Spain, 55 billion euros to the banks. But in this case, it's obviously totally voluntary. So Mobas is back. Is back. They have their show. And that, I think, is pretty remarkable, pretty unique. The first company that I know, the first startup that I know that it was saved through begging, and it's not totally saved, okay, because maybe they run out of money again, but I really hope they don't, because they put on a great show, and Neil is a great entrepreneur, and because they've proven that in times of crisis, necessity is the mother of invention, right? That's what they've proven. So I wanted to speak a little now about sort of I've told you about sort of the microeconomics. Let's talk a little bit about the macroeconomics now. And I can go on a little with investments, and I wanted to leave also a little time for Q&A. I think the macroeconomics of the world right now are horrible, right? They're really horrible. The shares of Nokia are down 60%, of Google, of Cisco, of Apple, of everybody. Shares are down 50, 60%, 70%. The president of my own country, Argentina, came up with this thing that when the crisis started in the States, she was proud of how well the finances of Argentina were. And she called it, instead of el efecto tequila, right, or all these crises, that now the jazz effect, because it came from the United States, whatever. And it turned out to be absurd, because then the crisis hit Argentina so badly that the Argentine government had to take all the money from the pensions to somehow stay afloat. So this is a global crisis. It affects Portugal, it affects Europe in general, it affects China, the shares are down 60, 70%, it affects Latin America, it affects everywhere. But why is it that I'm still optimistic? Well, first of all, because a lot of the things that are done in technology are done with a 10-year horizon, with a 5-year horizon, and we'll be out of this crisis in 5 years, or in 3. We're not going to be out of this crisis tomorrow, but we'll be out of this crisis like we've been out of every crisis. And even though the stock market in 1929 hit a level that it didn't hit again until 1957, so you can see that there was some time until things go back to where they were in 1929, the question is not really so much as to when do they go back to where they were or whatever. The question is, how can you make a living? How can you survive? Is your company profitable? Do you have an original idea? Can you compete? Because Japan has been in a crisis more or less since the late 80s. And still there's tremendous innovation in Japan. There's just their GDP doesn't grow. It gets different. It gets different things. And phone, for example, has done super well in Japan. And Japan is still the second economy in the world, just in terms of, especially because the yen is so strong, right? So my advice to people who are entrepreneurs is, of course, now you can't raise money, and I'm so glad that we had raised our money at Fund before this crisis, and the crisis caught us very near break-even and not at the beginning, because we would be dead by now. But if we were dead, maybe we would have done something like what Anil did with Mobas. Maybe we would have created or come up with some very special idea. Maybe global begging wouldn't have been else. But it's certain, for example, Google, who invested in my company, Phone, when I speak to Larry and Sergey, who started Google, about the time at which they started Google, they will tell you in private that the fact that they started Google during a time that nobody else could raise money was a great thing. Of course, it's bad. You don't want to say this publicly because you don't want to, put anyone down. But it just makes sense that at the time like this, the people who are, it's sort of the same with antibiotics and bacteria, right? It's sort of like, it's a situation that when there's a lot of environmental pressure, a few grow strong, whether you like them or not. And in the case of certain companies that got strong out of that area, you had, for example, Microsoft, which is not one of my favorite companies in the world, although they do some good things. And you had Google, which is my favorite company in the world, but I guess you could say because they invested with me. So I don't have any objectivity in saying this, but I'm just saying it anyway. And so the 2001 crisis made some old companies stronger, but it made some new companies happen. Okay, and the crisis now will also make old companies stronger because they will survive because they're so big and so strong, but it will make new companies, it will make venture capitalists to focus on the few investments they have that are doing well. And those companies will tend to do better. So this is a summary of what I had to say. And I think maybe we should stop now and do some Q&A. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Any questions? Is there a microphone for people who ask questions? By the way, my email, as I said, is martin@fon.com. If you're shy, I have a BlackBerry here, so you send me your question. I get it here. I read it, and it's totally confidential. I won't even say your name. Any daring souls? You know, sometimes, yeah, here's a courageous gentleman there.
Hi. I was thinking of using the BlackBerry, but it takes a lot of time typing. I would like to bring back the problem of culture. You know, what I do is video games, so I do have to deal a lot with the United States. And in our company here in Lisbon, we have people from Asia, we have people from America, and we have Europeans. And there is really something about the way Europe is structured, the way it's so kind of fragmented, the way that money is put on to make a cluster here and a cluster there and whatever. I would just, not really a question, but as you also have a lot of experience in America, you studied there, etc. If you have one or two advices for us to, you spoke about that, of course, but for us to overcome this problem, that is not to move to San Francisco, because that's, of course, something we might do soon. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yes, I don't believe in government intervention in business in general, but I do believe in government intervention in one field which tends to be greatly associated with technology success, and that is universities. I cannot conceive of Silicon Valley without Stanford, and I think if the Portuguese government can do something, it's certainly to help the best universities in this country, because it's around universities that a lot of great ideas happen, and this migration from the university environment to the corporate environment to the startup environment that makes it happen. But I think your company, without knowing it, it really sounds like a very good example of what I think that companies in the Iberian Peninsula should be doing, which is, you are in Portugal. Well, Israel is the most incredible country for this. I mean, I use a lot of companies that then I find out they were Israeli companies. They just show up as companies. For example, Fring. I don't know if anyone uses Fring on the mobile phone, which puts everything together. Facebook, Gmail, Messenger, Yahoo, Google Talk, Skype. It puts everything on your mobile phone. And I started using Fring, and then I blogged that I was using Fring, and then the people from Fring contacted me, and it turns out that they were Israelis, and they asked me if I could be on their advisory board, and a year later I said yes. The Israelis understand so well that if they make something to be consumed by the Israelis, they'll always be poor. They will have 5 million people consume their stuff. Having said that, one of the most interesting startups in the world right now is in Israel, which is this concept of, by this guy Agassi, of turning the whole country into a grid that, electricity at night is we don't know what to do with electricity at night, right? We cannot turn on many of the sources that produce electricity, and unless we organize the population in different shifts that are awake during the night, or I guess we have many more nightclubbers, there's the use of the electricity is certainly driven by people being awake, okay? So this whole concept that while you sleep, your car is getting charged with electricity that would otherwise go to the ground, and this whole concept of which Israel is perfect as a country to do this for two reasons. Surprisingly, because all their neighbors don't like them, let's say, and so the cars are not used to travel outside of Israel, right? Because if you did this in Portugal and then these cars would go across to Spain and die, well, maybe okay, you would want a car that only works in Portugal, but you're less likely to want a car that it's just almost against the concept of a car that dies at the border, right? But because the Israeli situation is such that they, unfortunately, the concept of dying at the border is somehow real, or the concept of trying to drive into Syria or drive into Lebanon, whatever, is not so practical. If they only put electricity in Israel with these gas stations, it really works out. So if you have a country that has a culture that is strong, you could maybe use your own country as a lab, as a lab for certain things. Maybe you can try your games with the kids here. In any case, to me, kids are so global now. I have 4 children myself, and I play games with them, and it's like the games are so global that kids anywhere are probably good testers for games, So anyway, those are my thoughts about how to combine your culture with other cultures and how to get out of your own culture if you're going to make a product like the one you make, like games. Do we have time for another question, or we should finish? Oh, yeah? They were here. Oh, okay. Very good. Yes, the mic is coming.
My name is Pedro Barros from the Instituto Superior Técnico. I'd like to provoke some thoughts from you on any correlation between craziness and success. How crazy is an idea, and how does that relate with the rewards and the pitfalls?
Okay, no, I like that question because I'll turn it around. And I say that the other element of that is I'll say it in Spanish, see if you understand, but el miedo al ridículo, okay? The fear of being ridiculous, okay? In Spain and in Portugal, unfortunately, and by the way, being Argentine, having lived in the States and coming out to Spain and Portugal, I'm sorry to say, but the Spanish and the Portuguese have much more in common than you guys think. And one of them is el miedo al ridículo, right? When I said, who wants to ask a question? When I speak to so many people in the States, who wants to ask a question? It's like a war for the mic, okay? So that fear of being crazy, that fear, what if I ask a stupid question? What if all my colleagues, okay, Martin comes and goes, but what about all my friends who are here? What are they going to think about my stupid question, right? So that concept of being afraid of being different, or being afraid of being original, or being afraid of failing, crazy people don't tend to have, right? Because they don't give a damn about what anyone else thinks, right? And I would say that among some of the most successful people in the world who I met, I don't know if anybody here has ever met Jeff Bezos, or has Jeff Bezos come and speak in Portugal? Has he ever come, from Amazon? Have you ever heard Jeff Bezos laugh? I mean, he's like, ha, 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 ha. And everyone else is like, what? And probably he knows it, but he doesn't care. It's his laughter. He owns it. He laughs like that. And if you think it's crazy, he doesn't care. He's just having a great time. So that, yes, I think the sense that I am my own, or for example, I'll give you an idea, a crazy idea. I was with Larry Page recently, very proud of myself. And I go and say, Larry, I started these companies in Spain. We became really big in wind and solar. Now you guys are getting into wind and solar. We developed a lot of farms. Maybe you want to invest with us, whatever. It's like, oh no, we don't invest in wind and solar farms. We have, in Google, we have created this Google Alternative Energy part, but we invest in enabling technologies. And I said, well, but wind and solar, it's like, turbines, right? Wind turbines. It's only about a bigger turbine, a bigger wind generator, and that's the only thing you see really with wind energy. It seems to be getting bigger. The windmills are getting bigger. That's all you see. And so he tells me that this is what they just invested in. And this is an example of the craziness that I love. We just invested in a company that flies a gigantic kite that has turbines in it all the way up to the jet stream, okay? 11 kilometers up in the sky. So the concept is you fly a kite so high that over there's always wind. As we know, right? When you fly from Lisbon to New York, it's always fighting the jet stream, and when you come back, it's so fast you cannot sleep, right? And it's like, why isn't it the other way so I can sleep, Why is the flight when I come back so short? Well, it's called the jet stream, right? The jet stream that is always pushing these planes. So the kite deals with the fact that nobody likes to see those windmills. I don't know. That's the type of crazy idea that blows my mind. Okay, so why is it that we've been doing this in Europe for so long and nobody has gone to fly a kite? I don't know. And I don't even know if that's going to work.
I'd like just to ask you another. Oh, okay.
We have to finish. Okay, thank you very much.